So who here is a founder of a startup? Okay, and who here is a product manager or something in somebody else's startup? And who here is unemployed? Okay, great, fantastic. I'm Phil, I'm the founder and CEO of Pollenizer. For those of you that don't know my company, we were the first tech startup incubator here in Sydney, founded about 8 years ago. These days, as well as doing that, we also help some of the world's biggest companies make their own incubators. We've been all over lean startup as the only way to start companies since we've been wasting our own money trying to start startups 8 years ago. So I always say the reason we need lean startup is because startups are almost certain to fail if you just go with the laws of nature. So we must find a way of removing that risk. And the best way we've found to remove that risk is this, it's lean startup. We started about 8 years ago following the work of Steve Blank. For those of you that have seen his work, that's terrific stuff to read about for lean. That's the whole idea of customer development. So how you actually go out there and hunt down and discover who your customer is and what they want and what product they want. And that's where we began. And then a little bit after that, we actually brought Eric Ries over here to Australia. And I think it was the first ever lean startup meetup that actually happened in, I don't know, one of the pubs on Kent Street years ago. So lean sort of has been living strong here in Australia for some years, and it's fantastic that you're all getting involved with it. But what I want to talk about today is something that, it's actually this question, it's how do you scale lean, right? Because lean has become famous for minimum viable product. And lean has become famous for, you know, putting something out a little bit before it's ready. And lean has not become famous for moonshots. Right? And so what I want to talk about is how do we use lean, how do we do lean every single day and yet have a strategic ambition, which is massive. Like how do we have a massive that pulls us through? And this whole idea here that it's the paradox of starting small to get big. So has anyone heard of Peter Thiel? Yeah. So this is what Peter Thiel says lean startup is. It's making small things small changes to things that already exist. It's listening to what customers say they want. And he means that as an insult. He means instead of building something extraordinary that they haven't even thought of yet, or making nothing more than a minimum viable product. But this isn't correct. And what I want to do is recalibrate. So think about all the things that have changed in the last 5 years, many of these things using lean startup techniques. So how we read, how we watch television, how we buy things, how we go places, how we turn on the light and generally automate our homes, and a lot more changes to come there, how we work, how we talk to each other. And all these things are causing massive, massive changes. And these changes are happening because things like lean startup are destroying the world as fast as they're making new things. Customers out there want us to make new products faster and faster and faster, and it's causing whole businesses to be wiped out. And you can see here, Seek and Car Sales, two classifieds companies, once startups, not so much anymore, completely eradicating the Fairfax business model that went from something like $7.5 billion down to about $1.5 billion. Seek and Car Sales alone are worth more than that now, and then there's all the other classifieds businesses. So we're all making businesses that are bigger than any of these businesses that were there before. The innovation is getting faster, the impact is getting larger, and so the reason we have to have lean is that we have to work fast. It's the only competitive advantage. There's no time anymore to work slow and think about things. Think about music. Think about how music has changed, how the impact has got bigger, faster, the cycles have gone shorter. Who thought they were going to be on iTunes for a decade? And then who uses iTunes today? Whoa, boom, it's gone. All right, but Spotify, and even, you know, Spotify itself has other competing forces like SoundCloud that do other things better. These things are all coming from lean startup type work, which is understanding what customers want as fast as they can think it. Think about the television. Television, who knows what that's becoming? It's shattering into 1,000 different sectors. what is a media company? Here is Upworthy. Right, we've all seen Upworthy probably in our Facebook feeds. It's a media company. It makes money from advertising, but it's not like a TV company. It's not like a magazine company. It's come out of nowhere with 88 million users. Maybe it will all go away just as fast as it came, but that's the new market that we're all working in and why we need a different way of working. Here's some more information for you. This is a graph of customers coming online in the next few years, in the next 4 years, in fact, because what you can see here is what the world's going to be like in 2020, and you can see that there'll be 5 billion people with smartphones. These are our customers. These people have very high expectations of what we make for them, and they need us to make it faster, and it needs to be brilliant. The thing about this chart is it's showing that half of them are going to appear out of thin air in the next 4 years. So half of them have come in the entire history up to this point. The other half are coming in the next 4 years. And these are customers who have smartphones. They have very powerful computers in their pocket. And this isn't only relevant to those of us that are making websites and online businesses. This is why every business in the entire world is changing. These smartphones are not only phones and communication devices, but they're very powerful computers. You all know this. They can see, they know which way around they are. They can connect to things all over the world, all the biggest databases in the world. The important thing is, though, it defines what our customers want us to make. Their expectations of us is very, very high, and they're very fickle. They come online very, very quickly, and then they go. This whole leisurely adoption curve that businesses used to depend on for decade-long owning the market has gone. Now it's all happening faster. What I find really interesting about this is it's the argument for why we must do lean and be courageous enough to get in front of consumers as soon as we can, because what we're seeing here is the innovators that help this curve happen are actually collaborating with us to define what that product is. And the only way we can do that is to put something in their hands on the first day, like the great freelancer story that we heard at the beginning of the session. More and more people can work in this way. This is the other part of the competitive landscape. So you don't have to be Google anymore, right? So this is from Andreessen Horowitz, this data, one of the big VC funds. And you can see here that in 2000, here's your typical Series A funded company, 100 staff, 1 million users, $10 million raised to get to that point. Today, it's inverted in opposite directions. So there are 10 times less people to get to 10 times more users with 10 times less money raised. Like, this is the world that we're all in, with extreme examples like Yo. Who's used Yo? Does anyone know what Yo is? It's a completely useless application. It's a social network that allows you to send Yo to everybody on your network, right? It does nothing. But one person, 1 million users, no money. And now that is growing into a bigger thing. And certainly it is penetrated. It's got the interest of the world, or at least it did for a little while. So human progress is going really fast. We have to have technologies and methodologies like lean to keep up, because this is actually where we are today. It's exponential. So we have to just get better. We think it's going too fast now. We have to get faster, and we have to do that and stay in control. Already, these computers in people's pocket, they're as powerful as a mouse's brain. That's 1 million times more powerful, though, than they were just a few years ago. But already, as powerful as a mouse's brain, $1,000 in our pockets. But in 5 years, it'll be a human brain in our pocket. That's how fast everything's going. And the question I ask myself is, what do people want me to build when they've got that in their pocket? Right? Just think about it, what you're going to have to make. Some of these tools are going to be incredibly rich, and we're going to have to be so good at learning faster than anybody else. This is a visual depiction of it. This animation is saying, so what if we filled up Lake Michigan at the same rate of technology change? So specifically Moore's law and computing power getting faster and faster and faster. Note that nothing happens until about now, and then watch what happens. So this is the speed of change. This is what's about to happen, all right? Things are just about to go crazy, and we can't just feel our way through, right? We have to be good at understanding what people want, measuring it, and making something great. So it's going to go faster. Transport, power, health, what money is, not just how payments happen. All these things are going to happen really fast. So we have to have a sense of massiveness, right? We have to have ambition. We have to be making something huge, and we can't be building things based on what we thought was happening yesterday. But let's talk about something that's not massive now. Can someone name this startup, please? Pardon? Facebook, yeah. So this is not massive. So the customer is university students, actually at one university. The problem is, I don't know the name of the person in my class, and the solution is a photo and information about each person in the university. Can you imagine pitching that to Blackbird Ventures? Hey guys, got an amazing idea. What if we took pictures of people and wrote about them and made a directory for the university? Right, this does not sound like a massive idea, but it delivered immediate value, and then it went on to become something massive. So no one said dream small. They just said start with something that you can deliver entirely to your customer base and then build on that. And of course, we all know what's happened to Facebook, arguably one of the best lean startup companies in the world still today, even though it's enormous. So what we're trying to do is have two things in our mind at the same time. My argument is that we do not need to be small to be lean. I think Peter Thiel is wrong. We do not build things that customers already know that they want. We do not make tiny optimizations to small things. We make massive things. We just know what we can prove today. So we have a massive thing. We have our North Star that we never forget. And we also have what we're working on today. And this is actually a Peter Thiel idea that I like very, very much. He says we have to make a small monopoly that we can measure and build upon. So what he means by that is he says we should always dominate a monopoly. From the first moment of founding our company to that first customer you speak to and give them something, we have to dominate a monopoly. As it happens, the segment that we're selling our product to has got one person in that moment. And when we've dominated that, we throw out the circle and we dominate a market with a slightly larger circle. And when we've done that, we dominate a slightly larger circle, and we get bigger and bigger, but we always own our monopoly. And I think that's such a great way of working because it keeps us focused, it keeps us delivering awesomeness in everything that we do, but in the end, we're trying to make something massive. We're on a journey, so our North Star is pulling us up towards the right. I thought this was a really great example of lean space travel, okay? So here is the SpaceX business plan, which the massive is, let's get 1 million people colonizing Mars. Okay, so what's the plan? What do we have to do to get there? Right, well, the first thing is just trial and error. Minimum viable product. Let's get something up in space and make it stay there. And let's keep doing that, and let's optimize it, and let's bring the price down over time and eventually put people up there and so on. But you can see this is build, measure, learn, classic lean startup process through. As the business gets stronger and stronger, the business model optimizes, technology changes, prices come down, risk gets removed. Here's Tesla. The massive is, what if the planet was solar powered, right? That's a hard business to solve. You know, you would never go to a VC and say, I need $100 billion to start a company. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make the planet solar powered. But it's actually quite an interesting idea to say, well, let's just start off with the next biggest thing, and let's start off with a car. And let's not try and invent and build a whole car. Let's just try and take someone else's car and put a battery in it instead of a petrol engine and see what happens, see if we can figure that out. They did. Let's go to the next level then and say, let's make a car. Let's make the whole car and figure out how to do that. It probably has to be a really expensive car because the batteries are still going to be really expensive. So we can only do a supercar. We can't do a consumer car yet. Then what if we built a factory that just mass produced these things so the price of the batteries came right down? What if we could make really cheap cars then and lots of other people could have them? And then what if those batteries could power our homes as well, right? And so the thought goes on. Here's how we step up towards our message, but we've got this transformational goal in the top right which drives us through. It's not just about whacking a battery inside a Lotus. You know, here's Uber. What if we could exploit unused limo capacity in San Francisco? You know, how many people did not invest in Uber because that was such an unambitious plan, right? But the point is, they nailed it. And then, what if we could exploit limo capacity globally? No one can see them coming because no one cares about limos. They're just those guys that drop Emirates business class passengers off at the airport, right? But suddenly, they've been utilized better by somebody who's found this opportunity, and they've started to build out their monopoly, right? Next one, what if we could do this for other kinds of cars like taxis and private cars? And then eventually, you know, we can see the massive coming for Uber now. What if we could move anything, anywhere in the world, just by pressing the Uber button, right? Move an ice cream to me right now. You know, anything like that, Uber will be able to do, and that's their journey. That they're doing it step by step. They didn't try and build that business all in one go. This is one of our portfolio companies that's actually here called Lawpath. What if it was easy to customize legal documents and store them in the cloud? Okay, so fairly simple. What if we could connect with other cloud services and auto-complete documents? Okay, that's getting more complicated. What if we could profile customers and auto-manage their legal protections? They don't even have to think about it. The machine just protects them. And then finally, what if 50% of the legal services in the world were done by machines instead of by lawyers, right? And that's our ambition. So I want you to have a think about, we're not going to do an exercise or anything, but I want you to think about what your massive is. And I'm going to get somebody to stand up and volunteer for something. Who are the startup founders again? Put your hands up. All right, okay, excellent. Making a mental note. So really what we're trying to do is we've got an MVP today. This is the thing that we're going to make right at the beginning. It's the simplest atomic version of our product, which has to deliver the full value proposition in its simplest form to a customer. Not a crappy experience, a good experience, but simpler experience. But always, always, we've got this North Star, this valuable company that nobody else is building on our mind, that we're dragging it up. And I've found a really good way of communicating this is something called the Pixar pitch. Has anyone ever done this Pixar pitch before? So, Leo, were you a founder? I used to be. Yeah. Well, come and stand up for me. So, yeah? So here's the exercise. The Pixar pitch is fantastic because it says every single Pixar movie has got the same pattern. Right? It's the same thing. Once upon a time. So think about it. It's a fairy tale, right? So once upon a time, there were a poor shoemaker and his wife. One day, they woke up in the morning to find a beautiful pair of shoes that had already been magically made. Because of that, they could sell those shoes and buy more leather. And every night after that, more and more shoes were made. And because of this, they became insanely wealthy until finally they retired in happiness in the magical forest, right? So you get the idea. That's the kind of thing how it works. But we can do this for our company. So we can say, and I'd like you to try this if you don't mind. So once upon a time, there was this problem out there that no one was solving, yeah? One day, we realized this and we solved it in this really simple way. And because of that, these things changed and we built this thing and that got better until eventually, and if you like, go past where your company went to some massive, just make up a fiction if you want to.
Yeah, basically this company was a marketplace for...
So, do the pattern. Do the pattern. Once upon a time.
Once upon a time was really hard for design studios to find a good printing supplier. One day, this company was in Brazil, so it's called Ceramic, which is CMYK, was created to do this matchmaking, to put them together. Because of that, it was easier and straightforward to find a provider to print your business cards or printing packaging, for example. Because of this, Ceramic, the startup was built, and until finally we could print, I don't know, 50% of global printing services.
Woohoo! Well done. Thanks a lot, Leo. Right, thank you, mate. Sit there. So you can see, it's like, you know, what's your fairy tale, right? What's your big thing? What's your massive? Like, it's really worth having. It excites you every day to go into work, and it drags you up. We all know, right? As we make these decisions, they could go any direction like this. We do the wiggly line up towards growing our company. And so, but if we've got this big vision, it pulls us up in some way towards something which actually may change, to be honest. I don't think anyone thinks Mark Zuckerberg actually had a business idea back then that you know, in his mind, that's the Facebook that's there today. But nevertheless, he would have known a bit ahead, and he's used it to drag himself up. So that's my message to you today. Like, have a massive, don't make small things, but absolutely know what you can build in tests today, and good luck with your businesses. Thanks for having me. Cool. Any questions?
What was your pizza pitch for your business?
Once upon a time, the world started changing and going really, really fast. And people couldn't keep up anymore. And their businesses were failing. They had lots of ideas, but they couldn't start them fast enough. They didn't know what to do. And then one day, Pollenizer came along and started sharing what it does every single day and started transforming those companies. Those companies got better and better at doing what they do, and more companies came along and started wanting to work with Pollenizer. And more companies started doing what Pollenizer or other companies like Pollenizer did, until the world got faster and faster, innovation got faster, and great things happened, until eventually it was possible to launch a $10 billion company in 5 years.
Pretty good.
Yeah? I just made that up, right? But it's an interesting thought, actually. You've got to, I really think, I actually had a thought, someone said to me the other day, you know, lean startup was big and now this is big. And then he started talking about this idea of exponential organizations. Have you heard about that as a word? It's like a new thing, this word. And the idea of exponential organizations is that they're designed to become massive. So actually, when you're making your business model, you're thinking, how am I unshackled by assets? How can I make a modern, digitally driven, global business? And that challenged me a lot about Pollenizer, actually, because actually we're a consulting firm, right? So I actually had to think very hard about what is Pollenizer's way of becoming massive. And in fact, we have thoughts on how to do that now, and it's completely changed how we might do it, and we're running experiments now to see if that's possible, right? But it's an interesting thought when you start thinking, how can I become massive?
Yeah. Probably a good example would be Netflix. They transformed overnight.
Yep.
The online video streaming before was like DVDs in the mail, right?
Yeah, that's right. But you know, they're one of the best lean startup fake it till you make it ideas, aren't they? With the, I don't know if you guys have heard this story, but Reed Hastings, the first thing he did for Netflix was mail a DVD to himself and figured out how hard it was, right? It's like really hard to get people to return DVDs, so it's always had that culture of learning and iteration. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at lean from a pure startup. That's I get that. My business has about 50 employees, and it's actually been quite successful and built new products over time. I'm just interested in your thoughts. We've talked lean and we've talked MVP. Don't really know what we're doing. What would your advice be for introducing lean and then scaling that up within a company that's actually relatively mature and it's got the attitude for it, but where do you start?
So, I mean, this is what we do every day now with companies that are massive like Telstra and you know, Google, and we do it all over the shop. And the secret is really breaking things down into smaller atomic units, just like you do with a feature in Lean. And can you actually spin out a team which is small, so 3 people, and get them running fully Lean? You know, Amazon or Spotify call these pizza teams. Yeah? So only ever have a team that's small enough to feed with 1 pizza. As soon as it's too big and you can't give them 1 pizza, it's too big. And there's lots of logic for that. There's too much communication, too much, you know, wanting to do the right thing by you, for example. But if you can put a team off and say, look, here's your path. You've got 2 months. I want you to build, measure, learn your way through making something valuable autonomously on your own. Come back and see me, and here's your tiny amount of resource capacity to get that done. I think you'll find some amazing things happening, and then you can start to use that to infect the rest of your company very positively. Yeah.
How many slices you can make?
Sorry, I'll just do Adam and then I'll go to the back.
No, it's just cracking a joke.
You've got the floor there now.
If pizza has 8 slices, that means that if you want to...
Is it like a New York pizza or a crust pizza or a... Yeah.
if you really if you're really hungry, you have to have
That's
a list. So
go with the poetry here, you know. This big, sort of this big. Yeah.
Obviously, substantially tech-based products are easier to globalize. I mean, they're not bulky,
Yeah.
they're not physically.
Yeah.
What experiences Pollenizer had with Australian-based companies which have a product which is physical?
Yeah.
Perhaps,
Yeah, heaps.
some-
So we've done medicine, hospitals, solar batteries, medicine. Pardon? Sorry.
And taking them global.
Yeah.
That's where I'm heading on.
Yeah. Because what Lean Startup is business model generation, right? That's what we're doing. It doesn't matter whether it's technology or anything like that. It's actually looking at a business model, running experiments around it iteratively to optimize them, like the Toyota production line, and then in that way you can move that business model wherever you want to move it. But it's very challenging. Pollenizer I think has been the hardest one because we're people, right? So the only way we can scale our model is to wrap up what we do in terms of IP, in terms of online products that can then scale into other markets so that other people in other markets can do what we do and we can earn money through that happening. So that's another example. So there's always a way, and the thing, it's just the abstraction of things into a business model, I think, which I always find so powerful. So we obsess less about a solution or a product. We start thinking about what's the business model that solution or product is a part of, and then we optimize that. And that's the thing which always has us, we're looking for scalability always, and that's how we can take things global.
So a company that's basically bootstrapping can afford these services?
Pollenizer services now were extremely expensive, yeah. But no, actually, having said that, we have a whole bunch of free stuff as well. What we learned in our own business model generation, and we've been going for donkey's years, is when we first started running the training sessions, in order to generate a business, we offered them to entrepreneurs. But there's a flaw in that plan, right? We're trying to do product market fit. What's the flaw in this plan? Entrepreneurs have no money because they're starting companies. So they haven't got enough money to pay us. So it's a terrible business model. So it's a wrong thing to do, right? So what we did instead is we pivoted our model to make all that free. So you'll see there's a massive amount of free stuff on our website, online courses, all sorts of tools and things that can be used for free.
Do you actually help the startup get the funding? Like you go to the VCs with the startup to pitch the idea? Or?
No, not really. So when we started, we were very much like Blue Chili is today, which you may be familiar with. So it's technology co-founder, the whole kind of provision of everything around it, raising money. And we don't do that anymore. We're very much we're around we're the how, right? So what do you do when you come into work every day and build a startup? And separately to that, we make our own companies as founders, and we use our own process. And of course, with those, we're out raising money as well. Yeah. Hello.
I had a follow-up question on the business model canvas generation that you were talking about.
Yep.
Once you get massive, right, and you're entering new markets.
Yeah.
Do you have multiple business models, like
Yep.
based on the specific market or some part of the product that you're building? How do you?
Yeah, it goes fractal, right? So you just start. One business model becomes 8 business models and it's like the team question actually. One team per business model canvas, right? And then they're just tightly trying to optimize that. I really recommend. We have situations at work where there'll be an event, and we'll be promoting an event, for example, and no one's coming, and we'll look at it and go, but what's the value proposition? Why should anyone come with that message you just put up? And then you get someone to do a business model canvas just around an event or a campaign, and it still works, and all this value comes out, and then you start presenting the whole thing differently to everybody in a way that actually is contemplating what the value is and what the business model is just for that event. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
Actually, something to add to that. So Amazon does a press release for each of their whatever product or
Yeah.
products that they're working on, just so similar, where it's a press release of what you would tell the press about your product.
Yeah.
And this is a thing you write up before you even started
Yeah.
building it. And so that goes with this vision. What's the vision and how do you get there?
And what I love about that, right? So I don't know if you ever read a Paul Graham post from Y Combinator who said that if he looks back at all the founders that have been immensely successful, they've reputationally put something at stake in the early days. You know, they've gone on Charlie Rose and said we're going to disrupt hotels or something like that. And then because they put themselves on the line, they kind of have to come good with it. So being lean and mean, right? And that's so they. The thing about that is, you imagine this whole business model, you put it out there, and then you know you have that's it. You've got to build what you showed. I used to do that. My first career was as a theatre director, and the thing is, you actually have to do that in theatre. You have to come up with the marketing material a year before you've even hired the actors, right? So you basically say it's going to be this most amazing, spectacular show with scenes of this and that and amazing music by so-and-so, and all these things are going to happen. And then, you know, everyone starts buying tickets and you go, crikey, I better make that thing now. Yeah. So it's a great thing. It's a great idea.
Here's the interesting question, though, right? Now that you have something out there, it's almost like I'm telling you what the deliverable is.
Yeah.
Before I talk to my customer.
Yeah, it's sort of not lean, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you, I guess you sort of need a customer base that's okay with the fact that
Yeah. You say it's even better now. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. It's not very lean. I agree. Yeah.
As long as it's really vague.
That's right. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
I have a question, Phil.
Yeah.
So Steve Blank talks about startups being an entity that's created to deal with uncertainty because it's searching for a business model, right? You deal with a lot of corporates. When you find those business models, how does that entity change?
Yeah, so, you know, obviously the way corporates normally work is around certainty. So usually what would happen is there'll be a business case. Someone will say, tell me what you definitely will build. In fact, it's even more horrible than that. What corporates normally say is, thank you for coming to me today to ask for some capital expenditure. What asset will you build me for sure in the next year, right? That's the question. And then with that, there's going to be this sort of, you know, big chunk of money that comes. So they need certainty. The whole process is around certainty, and that's the bad thing. You're absolutely set up to fail from that first frame. What companies like Telstra are doing now, which is really inspiring, is actually funding things entirely different in the early stages. So there are rules like, well, principles more than rules, like when you're in the very early stage of business model discovery, we'll give you $200,000, which is a much in you know, enterprise land, and you've got 3 months, and you can only have 3 people on it, and that's it. Like, good luck, off you go, come and see me in 3 months. And then they have weekly funding cycles, and what I find really inspiring about the weekly funding cycles is you're more like an angel investor then. And it's like going back to your angel investor, meeting with them, giving updates, sharing insights, and then occasionally asking for some more funding to help go to the next level, which is really helpful because we all know, you know, that work on startups, on paper, the evidence around our companies in month 2 is sort of fairly, it's not something that the CEO of Telstra is going to be impressed with, put it that way, right? It's still too uncertain, that's fine if you're not risking that much money. And I think it's like Alcoholics Anonymous. You've seen the Dave McClure quote that says startups are companies that don't know who their customer is, how they're going to make money, and something else, something like that. So, you know, you can't go to a Telstra or something and say, hey, I've got this idea, but I don't really know who my customer is and how I'm going to make money and what the product is. But I do intend to find out. So as long as you admit that on the first day, like Alcoholics Anonymous, but then you go through a process of actually removing that risk by getting the evidence that gives you the certainty. But obviously we want certainty eventually, but we have to manage the journey to get there, and that's what Steve Blank's talking about. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess my question relates to something you said, that you mentioned you were Google.
Yeah.
And I guess it's perception versus reality. I mean, trying to look from the outside in, you know, Google, suddenly you think this is an amazing company, they know everything to do everything right.
Yeah.
So why do they actually use lean? I mean, or is that just the perception and the marketing branding, or is it just to protect their branding?
Well, why does it, let me ask you a question, why does it surprise you?
Because I think my perception is, and I think my perception is that they know precisely what they're doing, not that lean isn't the right methodology, but we have this branded image that, because everybody wants to work for them, all devs want to work for them, and all that sort of stuff. You just have this image that they're doing everything absolutely right, even though they're a massive conglomerate.
Yep.
Which I guess doesn't give them the flexibility that they might have had when they first started. But I guess it's that perception versus reality.
Yeah. Well, it's, I think it's like the, what do you do when you've got a bigger team, or what happens when the business gets more complicated? How many lean canvases do you have? I mean, the reality is there are multiple companies in Google, and there's a whole bunch of Google which is not a startup anymore, and is just a scaling, you know, it's a business that knows what its model is, and it just executes on that iteratively and makes it more and more and more efficient, which is still kind of lean, actually. They're still running experiments, they're still looking at the data, they're still optimizing as they go, but the risk and the amount of change that happens in the AdWords, for example, is very little, because it's just optimization now, like any other big company. And in fact, you can see in their growth curves for that kind of the business, that coming off the boil now as well. It's not a growth company anymore, that part of Google. But the other stuff is absolutely lean. It's all experimental. It's all putting things out there before they're ready, and then watching the data and optimizing it as they go. So they, you know, just different companies of different parts of Google at different levels. To answer your question? Yeah. Facebook is massively experimental, you know, to this day. Facebook, any developer in Facebook can release code to 1% of Facebook users whenever they want with an experiment, right? And they've got everything baked in to undo the mistake if a mistake happens, but they insist on the courage of pushing something out to 1% of the customers to actually get the data to learn about the, you know, whether it's performing as an idea. I love that. It's amazing, that one, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Do you actually use innovation accounting?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah. So one of the things we measure passionately is what we call learning points. So this came out of some of Steve Blank's work, in fact. There's a great blog post by Steve Blank called Moneyball for Startups. You've seen the movie Moneyball? So the movie Moneyball says, stop kind of looking for baseball players based on talent or what you observe. Look at the data, and you'll start seeing some interesting patterns emerge, and then pick based on the data. And so his idea for Moneyball for startups is, startups have started to develop this currency of pitching. So good pitch equals good startup, right? So what's happened is startups have just become really, really good at pitching, even if they've got a rubbish business underneath it, right? So he says instead, if you actually measure how much learning a startup does, and what that is how many times have they spoken to a customer, how many experiments have they run, how many failures have they had this week. So you're basically, in your culture, you're forcing experiments, you're forcing a learning through failing sometimes, and then pivoting and sort of turning into something else. Companies that do that more, regardless of what that stuff is, do better, right? That's because they're learning. Yeah.
Where are you capturing all that data? Because you've got lots of different experiments and interviews.
So we have a proprietary tool that we've made to do it. So where you create a lean canvas, first of all. So an Ash Maurya style lean canvas, not a business model canvas. Then you build up a series of experiments on each of those cells. So you're actually saying, here's my hypothesis, I want to test that. And learnings as well go into those cells. So we're just actively running things through the canvas, and every time we process them, you get a point, and we literally, everyone that comes into our incubator, we track them on a learning chart, and you know, the ones that learn the most do the best. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any place you'd say, okay, I've actually Googled around on innovation accounting, and that's not found anything particularly useful.
It's hard.
Is there somewhere you could recommend, whether it be a website or?
Yeah, there's quite a bit on our website. There's also Alistair Crowell. So he's written a book called Lean Analytics, and that's a terrific book. We brought him over last year, actually. It's a terrific guy. It's Crowell, I think. C-R-O-W. Yeah. E-L. Or Crow. Yeah. Anyway, it's good. The book's called Lean Analytics, you know, it's reasonably simple, Lean Analytics or innovation accounting. It's so there's either the kind of stuff we're talking about, which is just the act of learning. So it's not even anything to do with the startup. It's just, are we learning fast enough? But when we're normally talking about lean innovation accounting, we're talking about measuring value emerging from customers, right? Rather than normal accounting, which is growth, revenue, margin, right? These things are next step things to measure in a more mature company. What we want to know is when we put the offer in front of a customer, how many of them convert? When someone comes in the first time, do they come back again? You know, when they get an opportunity to share something, does somebody actually click on it on the other end? So you look at, you're measuring behavior and you're measuring ratios usually, some things which are actionable. So you say, look, so for example, if I said from my innovation accounting, the average return visits on my new website are 0.1, you can immediately see it's not a great business, right? You can see I haven't nailed it. I haven't got them to come back. It was kind of they came, they kicked the tires, and they left. So that's like a really good number to obsess on until we get that number up to, you know, multiple return visits. Yeah.
Paul Graham, one of his statements is do things that don't scale.
Yeah, build unsustainable companies. Well, I thought about that in the first discussion tonight, actually. That's exactly it, isn't it? The fake it till you make it. So Paul Graham, for those of you that don't know, is the founder of Y Combinator, the big incubator in the US. And he wrote a blog post, I think it was called Build Things That Don't Scale, just that, simply that, wasn't it? And he basically says we shouldn't be automating everything at the beginning because, one, we're wasting our time because we don't know what to automate yet. And second, we're not learning from customers, because the great thing about doing all this running around, so again, like that terrific freelancer example, is we're learning what customers want. We're seeing what they're wanting the system to do, and then we're having to do all the hard work to do it, and we're learning what they want, and that's what we should automate. So the Slack example was a great idea as well. No point in writing the bot until we see what questions people ask. Yeah. That answer your question? Yeah.
Go slightly in the face, though, of the sort of blue ocean strategy of you know, a new and disruptive thing. If you question your client base or customer base to tell you what they want, when you actually might have an idea that they haven't even thought of when their friend Steve Jobs produced.
Yeah. Well, that's what Peter Thiel was saying at the beginning of my presentation, and I think it's possible that that could happen with lean startups. So if you say, if your whole business model is about too much dog poo on the streets, here's the problem I'm going to try and solve, and then you start iterating up from that point, you may just end up solving that problem in Sydney and going no further, and you've got a fairly non-interesting business, right? But if you start off with a massive, and then you come back and back and back and think, what's the smallest instance of that, and start, so you know, Uber could have done something like that, for example, then you might make your way up the chain to something huge. Yeah.
Have you ever not things? You never go to a company and then got a job to a principal? What did you learn?
I haven't yet. I've sort of, generally it's what I've found is the reason people have the first thought that they don't want to do this is because they feel that it's too risky. When they understand that this is the act of de-risking, they're much happier. And I find that big companies are worried about doing lean when they think what we're doing is coming to them saying, give us $1 million in the way that you normally fund things, and then let's go and do a really crappy version in front of people on the street that just doesn't really work and is a bit tatty and might embarrass us. And they think that's what we're saying. Of course, they're worried. But I think there's enough experience of big companies now not getting products to market fast enough. Those products, when they get to market, they're not interesting enough in what customers want, that they have to do something. And actually, when you contemplate a lean approach, the risk is so small, like why wouldn't you try it? Yeah.
How does technology play here in terms of building an MVP and building up a business? Because you gave the example of Facebook being able to deploy code to 1% of
Yeah.
users and then roll it back.
Mm.
Because you can only do that with a platform, right?
Yep.
And the sophisticated technology underneath to allow your business to experiment.
Yep.
Right? So how does a startup or even more mature business do that without having a platform like Facebook?
Yeah. So I think what I've learned is it's not really about technology. I think if you've got a technology company and you've got that capability, it's very, very powerful, right? And just to be able to quickly change things, like Flickr had ways of deploying features only to some users and things like that. This is all sort of very, very helpful ways of experimenting. But really, for me, Lean isn't anything to do with technology. It's just business models. And so for example, we did some work with one of the food companies, and they had these concentrated fruit juice capsules, which they sell to cafes to make smoothies and things like that. And they were trying to figure out, are there any other business models for this product? And they had this idea for a vending machine that you go to get a kind of diagnosis. So instead of going to the vending machine and saying, give me a watermelon juice, you go to the vending machine and say, I've got a hangover and I have to go to work. And it sort of prescribes you something and then makes something from that. So Lean startup processes, they said to themselves, well, how do we know anyone wants that? And how do we know people aren't just going to go, ooh, like, you'll just give me something I don't really like the taste of? So actually, they just set up in a cafe one day and made a new menu where you had to order based on diagnosis, and then they just manually made up the things in the back. So the customer still got an amazing drink, which theoretically solved the problem, but it wasn't anything to do with technology. But in answer to your question, technology for a technology Lean startup is brilliant to exploit.
The question there is, for a technology Lean startup,
yeah.
At what point do you build this platform? Is it the chicken before the egg kind of thing?
Yeah.
Do you build it from day one so you can do these kind of things, or?
We always say build what you can sell. So so we like to build. So there's kind of two competing ideas here. So idea number one is, I strongly believe, get a customer to do something. Don't ask them what they think, right? So you have to build something, right? Even if it's a very quick prototype. So in a sense, the Slack idea, something was built. It was a Slack channel with this user who was pretending to be a bot. Something was built, and then over time it'll become more sophisticated. I think that non-technical co-founders, something I speak about a lot is non-technical co-founders with a technical business can do an awful lot before they come to Pivotal, for example, just trying something themselves and then come to you with a more refined idea that they've already figured out. And then when they get to that point where they need to, so we have a business called Hive Exchange, which is a really complicated trading platform for fresh produce like cucumbers and things like that. And it just started off as a WordPress site for the whole first year that the non-technical co-founder worked on, and just using plugins and simple templates and everything could do everything he needed to do. Now he's got to the point where it just, it's completely fried at the edges. It can't do it, and it needs the Pivotal, or it needs a professional team to build him the app that can scale and change fast enough. Yeah. Answer your question? Yeah. Cool.
I had like the founder of Airtasker sort of say, you just start up, just keep running until you hit a wall. And then
yeah, and then turn left.
Yeah,
exactly.
Keep going
Yeah.
until you hit another wall, and that's really
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
you build. Like you're
Yeah.
never going to see it coming.
Yeah.
You're just going to hit it and then figure it out.
Yeah. What a great quote.
It's a good problem to have.
It is.
When you hit the wall.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were running just before. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's take one more question.
Can you tell us a little bit about your company and how you started, how you are now?
Yeah.
Whether you've ever taken any equity in Braintree and made up, or whether you've lost?
Yeah. Oh, I've lost. Yeah. Yeah. So we started the company my co-founder Mick Lubinskas and I, we were running a company called Kazaa before we did Pollinizers. That was one of the big file sharing companies, and we're very fortunate to have that experience here in Australia because we have millions of users. We learned a lot about what we now call lean startup approaches to running a company. And when that all finished, we thought we wanted to do that again. And 8 years ago, there was not startups all over Sydney. It was like no one was doing startups. And if you had the crazy idea of starting a company, you went to California and did it over there. So we thought, let's just help people get started here. And we founded Pollenizer. And the first version was us just advising people. So I have a CTO background, and Mick is a CMO. So he advised on business strategy. I advised on technology strategy. And then what grew out of that is that people needed the teams and the know-how and the way of doing things. So we started hiring teams around that, and we raised some money. So we raised our first $500,000 fund. And one of the things we founded with that money was a business called Spreets, which we sold 9 months later to Yahoo for about $40 million. So it happened very, very fast. And that was our kind of defining moment where people went, holy crap, how did that just happen in a year? And that was literally a business that went from idea in the kitchen to generating $1.5 million a month in a year. It all happened very, very fast. We've got a whole bunch of successes since then. We've just exited WooBoard to a listed company. That's another one of the companies we founded. We've got a few late stage businesses. One called Mo Generation, or Oomph, which does all the advertising and iPad magazine products. We've got our Hive Exchange. What's that? Keith, yeah. So he was one of our first companies. Lawpath that I mentioned earlier. So we're quite small now in the number of startups we started. One of our big learnings is at our height we started 8 companies, I think, in 1 year, and we learned that spray and pray doesn't work. We learned it very hard. So that was our big disaster. We came crashing down on that one. As an incubator, you're actually a founder, right? That's the learning for me. If you're an accelerator where you have like a 3-month program or something, that's okay. You can push a whole bunch through because they already exist. They started before you. They come along, get some help, get up to the next level. You wave goodbye, say good luck, guys, off you go. Right? But with an incubator, you're there on the first day saying, so what should we do? And then you're part of figuring all that out. And when you're the annoying person that's also trying to do that with 8 other things, it doesn't go well. So I think we made some good pilot companies in that time. But certainly the raising money and things like that was just impossible. It's impossible to raise money for 8 companies all at the same time and do all that. So I think that was our lowest point. And then since then, we've developed a scalable model and a sustainable model that doesn't wait for the returns. It's actually, so the problem with if you're a venture business is you've just got to make sure you survive long enough until the exit happens, right? And we were lucky. We had a very early success, so that helped us a lot. But to grow a sustainable business, you have to have a dependable cash flow. So that's where our whole startup science model came about, where we take what we do to big companies and we monetize it that way, and that's been very successful for us. So we've got the 2 parts. We have the consulting services and building incubators for people. That's how we make our daily bread, and then we've got this big sort of venture capability for exits in the future from the portfolio.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.